What's up, guys? Tragic Reptiles here, coming back with another live informational video. We are going to touch base on some water dragons tonight. So I don't know too much about these guys, not anything I've ever owned, so this is definitely going to be something for me to learn. But we have someone very knowledgeable tonight, Alex Myers. Is going to come on and he's going to talk some Chinese water dragons, and let's get some more information on these guys. I don't see a lot of these, being kind of out there for, informational stuff. I know Dakota, I'm pretty sure has one. I'm quite certain he does. But that's kind of what I've seen. But I haven't seen a lot of videos and information on it. So hopefully this will be very informational to you to kind of pick up maybe some new tips to learn and carry on to your husbandry that you currently do. All right, so let's go ahead and bring on Dakota. What's happening, man?
Are you even a fan of the channel? Doesn't even know if I own a water dragon.
Well,
My God.
To be honest with you, I just talked to Alex here a second ago, and there might be a couple different types of water dragons.
Nope. Only one water dragon.
Okay, so that's something I don't know.
Water dragon's the only one.
Well, I'm learning. All right. So if it ain't monitors, I don't know. It's a learning thing. Okay. But glad to have you. Thanks for coming in. Let's bring him on. Alex, how's it going, man? Oh, we can't hear you.
That's not working. Although we do get to display.
Stupid mic muted. That was such a terrible
It's
intro. Right. Hi. How are you guys doing this evening?
You're good, man. We are good. So let's dive right into it. What got you into these guys? What really kind of sparked your interest?
So the biggest thing that I always have to tell people is that it wasn't water dragons that got me into water dragons. It was actually, and I remember this clear as day. I was in the 6th grade, and I was supposed to be working on like some basic essay, and of course on the computer screen I had reptilesmagazine.com open, and I was just reading all the care sheets, and I stumbled upon this article about sailfin dragons, or the Hydrosaurus species, by Scott Corning. And it was one of those where you don't believe in love at first sight until you see it. And I was like, holy crap, I have to have or work with those one day. I mean, the sail, the colors, at the time there were only 3 recognized species. Now they've just been reclassified this year into 5 species. And I just loved the idea of a large arboreal dragon that also could literally swim and hold its breath for about 20 minutes. And so upon further research, realizing that some of the species grow up to 4.5, 5 feet long, I began looking at some of the other agamid lizards from Southeast Asia, and that's when I stumbled upon the Asian water dragon, or Physognathus cocicinus, and it's still classified under the same binomial nomenclature to this day. And I got my first female as a gift in 2013, and I actually still have her. So she's 7 years old, and she still cranks out clutches so far for the past 2 years, and she's actually got some eggs due in a couple weeks. So I'm really excited. I'm hoping she retains some sperm. But then I got my male back in 2018, and I've been breeding them since. So they're a lot of fun, and a lot of people who have heard my name definitely associate me with Chinese water dragons and my work with them.
That's awesome, man. I was kind of browsing upon some of your photos and stuff on there. So congratulations on the guys that are upcoming. So that'll be pretty big.
I'm so excited. This year, despite 2020 sucking in general, has been my best year producing captive bred Chinese water dragons. So I'm hoping that trend keeps going on over the next couple of years, because it's one of those where, and I'll discuss this later, of course, but you try one thing with incubation, or you try one thing with introduction, you try one thing with misting or different pairings during systems of barometric pressure and whatnot, and you slowly start to realize what works better than the other things to get that perfect hatch rate and, of course, the healthiest, best looking babies you can produce.
Awesome. Dakota, anything to add to that?
Well, just right off the bat, I feel I'm a little out of shape with you guys wearing the head apparel. So I think what we're going to do,
There we go.
All right. Now I'm in the game. So first question's got to be, how are your projects going, man? You said 2020 is doing well. How many babies you got? I saw a video you guys did. You hatched out some babies not too long ago. So how are they doing?
Pretty well. Granted, that video, I have a bad habit on my YouTube channel of uploading like 2 months after something actually happens, just because I'm so busy between being a college student, caring for my collection at home, and then, over the summer, I actually was working a full-time job at my local reptile store. So that was still pretty awesome to work with some other species. But you can only film so many minutes or even hours of footage in between caring for stuff and, working all that.
I got honestly, 2 words for you, bud. GoPro.
Yeah. I'll have to consider investing in one of those. But as far as the clutches this year, it was a lot of fun. I finally achieved a 100% hatch rate. So that was my clutch that was laid back in April of 2020, and they hatched in June. So it was around 61-day incubation period on that clutch. And I had 9 eggs laid, 9 babies hatched. And that was just something that really, it's one of those where I feel like all that hard work truly paid off just after 2 years, because I had spent a lot of time trying to work on my incubation methods. And then unfortunately, back in 2018, I had an incubator failure, which resulted in a clutch hatching prematurely, and they didn't have stomachs developed. So they all died literally 3 weeks after they hatched. It was the weirdest phenomenon, but it was because of a power outage I had, and my incubator was, crap at the time. Did something different this year, and I think that definitely attributed to my success. I also have to thank my good friend Ryan Shermell, who runs Boreas Exotics, because being a college student, as you can imagine, 60 days of egg incubation, and I'm, getting 4, now 5 clutches of eggs this year. I have to go to my semester on campus. And so I actually was able to give him some of those eggs, and he sold those for me and raised them. He was another, a good mentor and a good friend of mine that has bred water dragons numerous times before I ever got into it. And as far as I know, based on the data he shared with me, my second clutch of eggs, that was 13 total with 1 big slug, all 12 of the eggs that weren't infertile did hatch. So that was another 100% success hatch out of the fertile clutches. And then lastly, and I believe this was just because she had only retained so much sperm from the male being paired with her, my third clutch laid in May. I believe it was it was in June on Father's Day. There was only about 12 eggs from that, and only 9 hatched. But again, all 9 made it out. There was no incubation failures or whatever. And I was just super pleased with it, because it's, again, something where, especially with agamids, I should say specifically water dragons, they live in a riparian environment. So you got to remember, in the wild, they're literally laying their eggs right in the side of the bank where that super dark, humus-rich soil is going to be, and it's going to be really freaking humid. I mean, you're already keeping this species at 80% humidity, so then keeping the eggs humid without them molding was sort of a challenge. And if you don't mind me going into this information as far as incubation is concerned, one of the biggest things that I had to keep in mind is that, as we all know, as reptile keepers and breeders, eggs needs 3 things: constant temperature, constant moisture, and I say moisture, not humidity, because the eggs will actually draw in water from the air to stay hydrated. And then, of course, like a proper substrate for them to stay on. The issue that arises, though, when you're keeping these eggs at such a high humidity is that you worry about them molding. And so pretty much one of the concepts that I had reviewed and looked at, and this was actually something that I based off of Ryan Shermell's design. What he did is the standard old school cooler incubator. So what you're doing is you're taking like, I used a 50-watt Aqueon heater, and this is just sitting at the bottom of it, filled with, say, 5 gallons of water, a little circulating pump. Because if you just have still water, and for those of you guys listening in on this, you get hot spots if your water isn't circulating. And of course, circulating water creates humidity. So now what you're able to do is, say you go to Home Depot and get some of that plastic egg crate. Let's say this is your, I'm trying to draw it with my hands, your incubator. You've got water on the bottom, and then your eggs are going to be sitting on literally like a shelf. And then you only poke holes on the sides of the container. Do not poke holes on the top where the lid is, because as you can imagine, circulating water, you're going to have water droplets collect on the top. If those fall onto the lid and go through your hole, and the water touches your eggs are gone. I mean, it's like direct water. As much as they need moisture is also, of course, a killer in too large of a quantity. So pretty much the idea is these eggs are staying dry. I was just using actually standard topsoil, and I have heard about perlite. I've heard vermiculite as far as incubation methods. But the thing is, I know Bert Langerwerf, who ran Agama International, he always recorded that his captive water dragons, and he bred Chinese water dragons, he bred Australian water dragons, striped water dragons. He worked with so many different agamids, is that a lot of these riparian species that utilize that sort of area that overhangs a riverbank, they're going to be nesting in this really dark organic soil. And I noticed that with my female, half of her enclosure right now is actually just Reptichip coconut substrate. So that way she doesn't kick in dirt in her water, because they always defecate in their water. But then the other half is actually a peat moss topsoil coca coir sand mix that I made. And she always lays in it. And it's interesting because when she's about to lay her eggs, she'll actually dig sort of decoy holes. So I'll see 3 areas that are dug up. But then, of course, where the eggs are is where it's completely flat. They actually
somewhat of like a monitor lizard. They do test digging with their faces before actually digging a hole. That's interesting.
Exactly. And I mean, that's exactly what she's doing. And it's interesting because usually what I've noticed is, or at least what I've observed, is that the actual area where the eggs are deposited, she will dig a test hole completely opposite of that. So it's sort of like eventually if you just learn to triangulate where the test hole is, you can find those eggs right away, get them out, and then get them into artificial incubation to ensure they survive. And that's pretty much what I did. Is I figured, well, if mother knows best laying in the darkest, most organic soil, use that as an incubation medium. Bert Langerwerf did it. It must be relative. And I know Eric Haycraft, who I don't think he has a specific, page. I know he's cask-headed on Instagram. He actually incubates a lot of his basilisk eggs on topsoil as well, which, while they are not in the agamid family, the niche that they fill is a very good example of what I'd say, convergent evolution.
Green lizard, all the same. 2
species inhibiting a riparian environment, but one's in Costa Rica, one's in Southeast Asia.
Close enough.
So, and pretty much, the soil, again, just keep it lightly damp, so much, just like sphagnum, you can't drip water out of it, and let the eggs do their thing. The idea is that they're not wet, but at the same time, with that all water base in the incubator, high humidity air, I mean, we're talking humidity that's almost around 100%, is able to go through those small ventilation holes you put in those egg boxes, and the egg can absorb and let out the moisture that it needs. So that way it's not constantly wet, but that way you're not dehydrating it and killing the embryo before it hatches. And I think that was one of the most crucial aspects as far as the captive incubation process went, simply just because of the fact that they need that high humidity, just as they do when you're caring for the lizard itself. And clearly, when people run into incubation issues, I think it's because they either keep them too wet or too dry, and you have to achieve that perfect medium. And of course, I realize I'm saying this, and any of you guys watching that, say, as Dakota, keep monitors, you'd realize pretty much a giant aquarium-based heater is a massive sim container. That's literally what it is.
Well, funny enough, I was just thinking that's a pretty unique way of doing things. I know a couple of people going along that route instead of just doing the super wet, whatever it is, vermiculite, super hatch, and then kind of just crossing your fingers and hoping. I think that's pretty awesome. One thing I wanted to side note, since we're on the topic of incubator medium, I watched a video of Kevin McCurley. Due to his monitor lights, hatching anywhere from 5 to 6 months. They're obviously in there for a while, and the egg molding, which, as you stated, is a pretty big concern. Actually, what he does is he uses a pretty thick layer of perlite And instead of using that bottom area to like as a water reserve, what he's actually doing is putting water crystals like you would do to feed any insect, or like the Miracle Grow water crystals inside the soil. And so what's happening is the eggs are taking the moisture from that instead of that water down there becoming stagnant, creating that bacteria, and then possibly something happening to the eggs, which I thought was another great way to go, instead of just having all that water down there and running into that problem of potentially molding.
I mean, that's a very, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much identical. Just instead of using actual water, you're using the water gel. And I know a lot of people that even will breed, like, I think they use those for plants too, like as sort of a area, what's it called, instead of the drainage layer, you just have water gel, and it creates that sort of humid area.
I wouldn't even have thought of that. Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, because over time it'll evaporate. That's cool.
How long does it take to hatch these guys out?
Well, that's the funny question, because it depends on the temperature. So I've had incubation days as short as, like I said, 61, and I've had incubation days as long as 120. So yes, because when I first bred water dragons, anybody that knows me knows that my original cage build, it was just a plywood build. It was so well insulated, the eggs actually hatched in situ, because my female, she's an exceptionally large girl. And as my first time breeding her, I couldn't tell she was gravid at the time. So these eggs, as far as I know, sat in the enclosure for who knows how long. And I came home one day in October 2018, and there's dragons running around the enclosure everywhere.
Oh, man.
It was the craziest phenomenon. I was like, holy crap. You know, I thought I had failed. I was like, oh, maybe the male just isn't ready to breed. Maybe she didn't ovulate. No, she did. She was just so good at hiding it and doing what a good mother dragon does. She covered her nest so well, I had no idea. And that was 2018. And in the process of digging up that nest, that's when I found out she triple clutched that year, and I dug up 24 more eggs. Wow. And that's when I sort of did my initial test of incubating those eggs literally at 78 degrees Fahrenheit. And that was in October. And so obviously one clutch of eggs was bigger than the other that I dug up, which I'm assuming was laid a month prior, since that's usually when they do back to back. And those eggs were dug up in October, and I don't know when they were laid. And those hatched in December, and then the next clutch hatched a month later in January. So, I mean, you're talking literally, you know, November, December. So that's 2 months from those eggs already growing in the enclosure that were dug up, and then a third month in January.
So how many eggs usually get laid, and then is there a temperature that is like a sheer indicator for like male or female base?
That's what I'm still trying to figure out, because I know with Australian water dragons, or should I specify the Eastern water dragon, Intelligama lesuri, is that if you incubate cooler and you incubate higher, you actually get all females. And they only get a mixed sex ratio if you incubate between 82 and 84 degrees. With Asian water dragons, I have a feeling it might be a little bit more male heavy on one end, female on the other, because out of all those babies that I incubated at 78, they all ended up being female. Every single photo I got back from my buyers. In fact, I literally had one guy in North Carolina buy my entire first clutch. He bought all 6 that hatched in the enclosure, and they all ended up being girls. But yet this year, the photos that I've gotten back from some customers, a lot of them do appear to be boys. And that was the clutch that I incubated at 86. And then I know Ryan, when he was caring for my clutches since I was away at college this fall, he incubated those at 84, 85. The issue is those guys now, those hatched in August, so they're still only, a few months old. They really just don't have their sex-defining traits in. And so unless I get photos back for them saying, hey, wanted to send you an update, I'll sadly never know. So it's something where 2-3 years from now, when I graduate, I'm hoping I can just hold back an entire clutch, or even divide a clutch in half, incubate one at 78, incubate the other at 86, and really see, okay, how many of you are boys, obviously knowing the others are girls, and sort of determine, because everybody wants a boy if they're keeping a pet. The males are beautiful. So, the idea is like if you could have a baby water dragon without holding it back 8 months and confirm to somebody that they will get a male, that just makes it so much easier on everybody. Because like I said, everybody wants a male. Everybody's always begging me for a male, because the photos I have of my male, despite him not having nose rub, like he is gorgeous. He's got some amazing color. The issue is like they want that, but I can't guarantee it. And that would be something truly amazing if, you know, I could incubate at a set temperature and say, yes, you are going to get a 3-foot male blue and green Asian water dragon.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So I actually didn't know about that, how short the incubation temps or the incubation time is for water dragons. I thought it was a lot longer, because like with say my mountain horn dragons, the last time I incubated them, it took 253 days, I believe, for them to hatch. It was ridiculous. It was the last time I did it. I had a, like you said, or like you had an incubation malfunction. So they actually hatched out too soon, and they only made it like a week. So I had like 7 babies that ended up perishing within the week, which really blew. But so I guess my follow-up question to that, so understanding with mountain horn dragons, I know why a lot of people aren't breeding them, just because they take a while to grow up. Breeding's a little difficult. Egg incubation is forever, and it has to be set at a specific temp, which is around 68 to 69 degrees. So with the incubation period really not being that long, I mean, I have crested geckos that incubate around that time. Why do you think there's not more captive breeding of this species?
It's just because they're imported by the thousands every year. That's the unfortunate reality is, you know, if you're truly passionate, you're just going to do it no matter what. And that's just honestly what I do. Really, like, I don't make much money at all breeding them. If anything, the babies just pay for the feeder crickets and the roaches that I might have to buy when my colonies of dubias need a break. And other than that, I just because you love the species. Like,
I could not agree more with you on that. I mean, that was the whole reason why I have savannas and I got into savannas, was because it's cheap, it's imported all the time. There's few to none people actually trying to breed those guys. So it's definitely, you got to have a passion for it. I agree with you 1,000% on that. Like, it's a passion thing for sure. Definitely.
It is, you know, and I mean, you know, on your topic of savanna monitors, I mean, that's a species that it gets the short end of the stick as far as monitors go.
That's my favorite part is, like, I look at those guys as, I mean, they were the first monitor that I ever had, and they are, I feel like, bashed on all the time. And it's like, there's not enough information out there for people to really kind of grasp. And then if there is information out there, it's like a complete 180 from each other. And then it's like, well, is this guy right? Is this guy right? And then none of it's like proven to be like, yes, this works, or, you know, is it correct? And it sucks. And that's one of the things that I want to do for it, is hopefully shed some light for people to be like, yeah, this works. This is ideal. This guy's doing it. You know, it works for him. I'm going to try it now, you know? So there's too many voices out there that really just, I guess, that don't have the experience in it, you know, and it sucks. I mean, for the water dragons, I mean, is the community kind of like that for those guys? Is there a lot of misled information?
There is much misled information. The biggest one I have to just get straight to the point is they do not understand what a clear barrier is. And it kills me every time I see some big chain pet store care sheet, or even, you know, some of the old Reptiles magazine articles from 2011 and 2014, where it's, especially with water dragons, it's this constant idea of a 55-gallon tank. And I kid you not, like, literally, it's always 55 gallons. It doesn't matter where you go. It's not like, you know, you say savanna monitors where it's like, have a cage big enough. It's like literally any water dragon care sheet that is outdated, it specifically states 55 gallons, which kills me because, you know, that's only a 4 foot by 1 foot by 21-inch glass terrarium. Yeah. And the lizard grows to be 2 to 3 feet long. It can't even turn around in that.
Right.
You know, it's that, and then
hilarious. It's super hilarious because today, literally, I was looking at those pamphlets today. I went to the pet store and ended up coming across it was a pinstripe ball python. Wife fell in love with it, so ended up having to get it. Luckily, it's female and it's gorgeous, so I made the exception. But I seen some of the pamphlets there, and the pamphlets, there was one for Savannah Monitor. And I'm looking at it and I'm reading it, and it doesn't say shit about humidity. And it's just, you're a pet store, like, you know, and it's sad and it's terrible because, you know, the people that come in there and they want to buy those guys, and, you know, they want to see them grow up and, you know, and be a long time forever pet. You don't have that humidity, that's not going to happen. They're going to have a short-lived life and may not even be healthy. Obviously, being, you know, not captive bred or anything like that, being, you know, farm bred or what, you know, wild caught, you're always going to have that risk. You know, mites could be, you know, whatever, any type of, you know, disease when it comes to that. You know, it's always a high risk, but I just couldn't believe it. And, you know, it's just like, the next time I go back, I'm probably going to grab a bunch of those just so I can like actually like read them and then really kind of go back with the people that I talk to, like for you example, discussing like, you know, it says this, but you're doing this and this works for you. So, I mean, how far off is it? You know, I feel like that really is a reality that needs to come into play because it's so off. It's shit and it sucks. It sucks. So,
and I mean, I think in general, you know what you're saying, how something works for somebody and something works for somebody else. The idea in my mind is always that it works. You know, I've always just gone by the mindset, you know, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then don't do that.
Right.
And so, especially like, you know, with water dragons, this is another species that needs incredibly high humidity, but at the same time, it's the air moisture and not keeping them wet. And this is what always amazes people. You know, they hear water dragon, and yes, they do live near water, but a lot of people hear that and they think, oh, they live in water. And people make the mistake of doing like a turtle setup. And what happens is that lizard then proceeds to get scale rot or like jungle rot or blisters.
Yeah.
Whereas at the same time, in contrast, the lizard set up in, say, 18 by 18 by 25 Zilla front opening terrarium with just a water bowl, branches, heat, and UVB, well, that has a screen top. So even if you spray it, your enclosure is going to dry out.
Yeah, it's not the humidity at all.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, since they live near water, they're used to constant humidity. Yeah, it may dip by 10% or so, but, you know, say you look at the weather in Thailand, it rains, their relative humidity is 80%, which is what a water dragon would have. And the low it gets is 40%. Well, is that 40% in the town or by the stream with warm moving water? Because I guarantee you the stream where the lizards are living is not getting that low. And that's a common issue. You can go on to iNaturalist, and that's something that I use a lot as far as trying to get my water dragons as close to nature as possible. Both, you know, just keeping that body weight lean, as you know, with savanna monitors. You know, their water dragons are insect eaters. Same with savanna monitors, and people are feeding them literally mice and gizzards, and they're not designed to eat that. And then we see clearly this is a species, specifically when I'm referring to the water dragons again, that's living near this high humidity riparian environment. Their spines are massive in the wild. And then I look at my male who has had stuck shed and nose rub, and his spines look tiny compared to their wild counterparts. It's like, so what are we doing wrong that their spines aren't even growing that high? And I have a feeling it's a humidity thing as well as UV related. I had a good buddy in Spain who runs Dragon Jack, I believe that's how you pronounce it. And he did a ton of well-ventilated water bottom enclosures with large land areas. So that way his humidity is always around 80-90%, but there's ventilation, so you're not going to get a respiratory infection, which lo and behold, what also maintains humidity like that? A PVC enclosure, a grow tent, something that doesn't have a screen top. You see what I mean? Like there's a correlation here. Clearly, if you see a water dragon with bad spikes or nose rub, what's it being housed in? And I guarantee you the answer is going to be a glass tank with a screen top or something with a screen top that's not allowing for the humidity. And even I'll admit, like that was a mistake I made. When I first built my wooden enclosure, we had screen cutouts for the lights on the top. And while I can spray that enclosure super well, by the end of the day, it'll go from 90% all the way down to like 55 in the winter, which isn't bad. Granted, you know, the water bowl and the area where it's closer down to the ground, it's probably more humid as it gets cooler. But then like my new animal plastics cage I just invested in to hopefully expand onto my water dragons, I spray that thing once every 24 to 48 hours, and it stays 90% humidity for a solid 12 hours. And then the lowest it gets is 81 by the time the enclosure is physically dry, but all of that water vapor is still in the air and humid, which is what they would experience in the wild. And lo and behold, guess who's shedding a lot better now? You know,
Yeah.
it's little things like that where, you know, I get it. Tanks work, and they work great for certain species. But again, if you have a water dragon, I'm just not a fan of the tanks for them. Like I said, I've kept plenty of my corn snakes in tanks, stuff that needs moderate humidity. But literally, you are dealing with a species of lizard that has spent millions of years evolving to live near water in high humidity. And when you put it in an enclosure that does not allow for high humidity, that animal is going to fail to thrive. And so that's the big aspect of it that I think needs to be covered.
So when you get a baby, okay, or let's just say I bought one from you, okay, beginner setup, proper husbandry starting off, what are you going to recommend to somebody that is a first-time owner, no experience getting one of these guys?
So honestly, if you've got the money, just have a PVC enclosure on hand. You know, even some of the, I know DIYcages.com makes a 2x2x3 with sockets mounted on the inside. So you could install a T5 UV strip, and then you've got your basking heat right there. You don't have any screen section, so you can spray that sucker once a day, and it's going to stay super humid. For substrate, I said I just use ReptiChip. I like it because the blocks are large enough that they can't get impacted if they eat it. I have actually seen my adult male, and I mean, his head's massive, and he'll try and grab a cricket. And if he gets it in his mouth, those bark pieces are so big, he just spits it out right away. It's not like Coca-Core or even like the Zoom Ed Reptibark, where it's just small enough of a bark piece that they're going to instinctually eat it. Or, you know, like Freedom Breeders Coca Blocks. I want to try that out because those are even bigger coconut husks. Just, again, something that they can't ingest, but still allowing to maintain that high humidity. They're an arboreal lizard, so give them lots of branches. I am a huge fan of cork bark because that stuff does not mold. It's expensive, I know, but trust me.
It's worth it.
It is. It's like when it comes to $15 for a massive piece of cork or $10 for that cool, weird, bent piece of sandblasted grapevine, your grapevine's going to mold literally within a week. Your cork is going to last 30 freaking years. So spend the extra money. I've tried desanitizing large outdoor pieces of wood. And literally just this year, I was having to replace some of that with cork bark I had bought because after literally years of being sprayed, that water just can't take, or the wood can't take the water damage that cork can. So cork bark, you can do fake foliage in the enclosure. Honestly, the dragons really don't seem to care. It's more of a human preference. As long as the dragons are just able to get up high and overlook their environment, that seems to work for them. Like I said, most pet people are going to want to do plants. In my case, plants are just more stuff to clean. And honestly, some of my adults will take greens sparingly. My male especially is more willing than the female. So with greens in his enclosure, I actually have to be careful because on days that he gets super hungry, I do see him trying to snack on some of the fake foliage, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
But it can be done. Like I said, anybody listening, you can create a really cool naturalistic enclosure. But at the same time, keeping things simple is not going to affect them at all. The biggest thing I always tell people is give these lizards what they want versus what you want.
Correct.
That's high heat, high humidity, no glass, just or screen.
So would you? I'm going to put you on the spot here. Would you recommend a grow tent for somebody that wanted to get one?
Absolutely. I literally, so my YouTube channel, my page, ALEXSAGAMIDS, which I just sell my babies under because, I don't need random people adding my normal profiles.
Yeah.
A lot of people
I still get that. I got a page and a channel and I still
it
came up to like
matter.
125 friend requests. I'm like, I have no idea who any of you people are.
And no, grow tents are awesome. The group that my page has for ALEXSAGAMIDS, a lot of my buyers use grow tents because they just maintain that air humidity. Again, though, the lizard is not wet, but the air is humid. I always tell people, again, think about going outside where you live, say in the Midwest where I'm at, and going outside in the Caribbean. The Caribbean is dry, but the air is moist, and that's what you need to mimic. And so, yeah, a grow tent, even a bubbler in a water bowl, it makes that much of a difference having a moving water source and creating humidity. Heated moving water is even better, which is perfect, because most people, I always tell, put your light bulb right above a branch where their water bowl is, because you're mimicking what they do in the wild. They come out of the dense foliage to bask on, stumps and snags over the water, so that way they can heat up and get that direct sunlight. And then if they see a predator, they just instantly dive right below like it's nothing.
Absolutely. Now, to add to that too is Dakota's got some great videos on grow tents and setups. Dakota, you've got a video for the Chinese water dragons, correct?
Yep.
So I highly recommend watching that. That is, there's a lot of information in there that can really kind of help you set that up. I do not condone, obviously, just buying a grow tent and sticking these guys in it. I don't know much about these guys, but I can tell you for any type of species of reptile, if you just do that and throw them in there, it's not going to work. It's not proper. It's not going to work out for you. Dakota reinforces it. I've seen some of the stuff he's done, and it's honestly, it's brilliant.
I don't do much reinforcing, actually.
Well, you've got it kind of walled up.
Oh, like the bamboo wall.
Yeah,
I did it because then when I post on Instagram and Facebook, people don't know it's a grow tent. Those dummies.
So yeah, no, it looks great, and I really feel like it mimics the actual environment that that they're a part of in the wild. They feel more, I guess, more comfortable and at home, and to what they're used to. So, Dakota, for husbandry, what would you say is probably one of the most important things for these guys besides humidity?
Shit, I was going to say humidity.
I know you were.
I think the number one thing for husbandry is, Alex already went through it, but not using glass. Glass is probably the worst thing you can do for a water dragon. There's so many pictures on Google's of water dragons with like half their face missing because they're just bashing it against the glass. When I first started working with water dragons, I used one of those, big ass Exoterra things, and my water dragon would climb on one of his branches and then jump and ram his face on the door, and then he would go back up and he would do it again. And that's pretty much what you're going to get when you use glass. So anything other than glass works a lot better than anything like an aquarium.
I'd say avoid screen too. Glass, they'll rub into it and bash their face, and then screen, they will literally cheese grate their face. And that's when you start running into some serious issues.
Yep.
And you'd be surprised, like even covering the front, well, I'd say be surprised what that can do, but that has never worked for me. Even my enclosures, like I said, my new animal plastics cage has a 18-inch lip from the bottom, and he still got up on the top shelf and tried to yeet himself through the glass. So I literally have a 6-foot cage that you can't even see into, which sucks. But it's like they really they don't understand clear barriers. That's the biggest thing.
Now, it's one of the reasons why I really love the grow tents is because, one, you just got that small window, and that thing's like 4 or 5 feet in the air, depending on what model you get. But just that vinyl, the little plastic vinyl, they're not going to do much on that. Granted, if it's rubbing its face 24/7, I imagine something would happen, but you're definitely going to have a lot easier of a time than using any glass like that.
Now, I wanna ask a question here. So, for example, a grow tent, okay? Obviously, you've got limited visibility. Interactions, okay? So how are these guys, if you were to keep one in, do you have a grow tent? Do you use a grow tent?
No. All of my stuff is either PVC or wooden.
So do they have the ability to see you all the time?
Not really.
Okay. So with them not seeing you, how does that play into factor of taming down, like how, I don't know too much about them and like how their behavior is. Are they kind of, skitsy runny? Are they, how do you tame them down?
Biggest thing I'd say is just start slow. My female is probably one of the best examples of a wild caught dragon that was properly tamed down. In the years I've had her, even before I bred her, I was a volunteer at the Madison Area Herpetological Society. And so I would take her to shows. She's actually been to Sewer Fest, if any of you guys are watching, in the Wisconsin, Chicagoland area. And she would sit out on a table for hours. And I mean, thousands of people would just walk by and poke and prod and pet her, because the idea is that you start, honestly, I love hand feeding. You know, I think one of the biggest things that you can teach these lizards, because of how flighty they are, is that you're not a big hairy ape that's going to eat them. So by showing that you provide food, that sort of is a little bit of positive reinforcement. And then you can slowly start scooping them up. And usually it just gets to the point where they'll just sit right on your arm and they don't do anything else. You can rub them under the chin. The biggest thing that I'd always suggest, though, is scoop them up, never come down from above like a bird of prey or a predator, because that's one of their biggest natural killers in the wild are birds of prey. They sit right on the stream and it swoops down and takes them. So that's sort of like a big no-no for them. But otherwise, you know, they can be very, very flighty, but that's usually with wild caught ones.
Yep.
All of the customer feedback that I have received from my captive bred babies, because I can't help myself when I'm caring for them, they hop out and I'm poking and prodding them literally while they're a week old. And pretty much it's just, I think it's all about brainwashing them in a sense that you are not going to kill them. And then once they just learn that over repeated exposure, they become pretty much just like a bearded dragon where they'll sit out on you. They are very active. I mean, I'll tell you, in the enclosure, I hear them hopping around all the time and doing their thing. But once you get them out, they just sort of sit there. My male is unfortunately not that well behaved, but that's because I think I got him as a wild caught subadult, whereas my female I got as a juvenile, so I had the time to imprint on her, whereas he pretty much literally has Vietnam flashbacks, as that's where he was collected, and he just will never trust people. But the way I see it, if he's the one water dragon that won't trust me, but the dozens of his babies that I have produced will trust their owners, then my mission's completed.
Nice. Okay. Well, that's awesome. I use a lot of similar methods of being very patient is key. If you go too fast, you're going to go 10 steps backwards, and it's going to be a huge backtracking to really kind of gain their trust. And it sucks, but you really have to be careful and very patient with these guys. As you know, as beautiful as they are, you can't rush in there. You can't grab them. And I mean, that's just for, I feel like any reptile that really is. You have to approach them not from a predator that's going to eat them. You need to take a different approach that they're not going to relate that to. And I can't emphasize that enough of how important that is. Dakota, what do you do for yours? Do you have any special methods that you use to tame these guys down, or any type of bonding tactics, such as feeding and whatnot?
Funny enough, I mean, I was doing pretty much everything Alex was doing, but recently I made a video on one of them. I can't remember which one. I did one video and I held him the entire time. And ever since that day, he has been a little shit, like terrified of me. I've had multiple times where he flings himself out of the cage and then I have to chase him around my building. And trust me, there are a bunch of nooks and crannies. I mean, there's probably a quarter of that building that's just like storage, which is just all my junk I pile up top. And so I have to go through box to box trying to figure out where he like wedged himself into. So yeah, I would recommend not force handling. That would be my biggest thing.
Yep. A lot of people I get, questions about savannas and, force handling. And I've had people tell me, oh, I just, I tell them the method that I use. And they're like, well, I just grab them out. Well, I mean, did you get bit? How'd that work out for you? And sure shit. Yeah, I got bit. I got bit twice. Well, how would you like it if you didn't get bit? And maybe you just try those methods, because I don't like getting bit by savannas, and let alone I think any reptile. Last night I got bit by our skink that we have, and those fuckers pack a punch. Let me tell you, that does not feel nice at all. And take your time, people, please. Please just
I was gonna say, yeah. The last time he got out, he actually bit me, and I didn't realize how bad a Chinese water dragon bite would be. But it didn't tickle.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'll take a leopard gecko bite any day. That's a walk in the park. But you start hanging out with these other guys. I mean, what would you rate a bite, Alex, on a scale of 1 to 10? A bite from one of those guys, what would it be?
Depends on the bite. Because if it's like, out of aggressiveness, or I should say defensiveness, that they're gonna bite down pretty hard to make you let go. However, I've also been on the receiving end of an accidental food bite, which is 10 times worse in my opinion. I'd say if it's a defensive bite, you're probably on like say a 6 on a 1 to 10, but a food bite is an 8 because they put the whole mouth. Because what they do is they grab their prey, they pull it in, and then they try and chew it with their molars. Except unlike our molars, which are flat, theirs are triangular shape. And they're crunching down on that with all their force. And let me tell you, like my thumb still sometimes just gets sore seeing them chew up a cricket. Because it hurts. It really does. That's the thing that I always tell people, that which sucks about sort of that insectivore omnivorous lizard. It's not like a monitor, say a crocodile monitor, the bite of all bites, where it's designed to just cut and tear because it's used to eating meat. You're having something that is designed to break an exoskeleton, and it's clamping down. And it hurts. It really does hurt. But again, once they're tame, I think, like I said, in the 7 years I've been keeping water dragons now, I've been bitten twice. And one was the defensive bite, trying to wrangle my male, and the other one was a food bite. And that was it.
Nice.
They're always more inclined to run.
So nutrition. What do you do nutritionally for these guys?
Variety is the spice of life, but you want to keep it, in my opinion, in an all insect diet. If you can supplement greens, that'll work too. But I used to feed more of the omnivorous predatory diet because that was the information I had at the time, 5 years ago. And then what was interesting is that a paper came out in 2017, which was the wild diet of the Indo-Chinese water dragon. And it was actually surveyed in Vietnam, 3 different districts. Well, lo and behold, who's the #1 exporter for Asian water dragons in the American pet trade? Vietnam. So 90% of these lizards that we're seeing imported are from Vietnam. And the diet analysis literally showed it was like 3,066 items out of 3,070 something were all insects or invertebrates. And only 14 was plant material. No mice, no fish, no lizards, no meat, nada. Like there's nothing. And people are feeding them mice and lizards and goldfish, which, already have thymidase, which is awful for them.
So bad.
And you see these, fat, chunky water dragons. I post a photo of my male and I have to get the right angle. Otherwise I get yelled at that he's skinny. But yet, no, my male's still alive, whereas yours died of fatty liver at 2 years of age. Because people are feeding them what they are not evolutionarily designed to eat. And because of that, I've even cut out fatty insects. The largest insect in their diet was termites, which honestly didn't surprise me. A water dragon sitting in a tree, what's going to be running up the bark? Termites. What's going to be also running up the bark and was their second most identified food item? Ants, Formicidae, that family. Cockroaches, earthworms, spiders, arachne. But they're not even eating beetle larvae. So these people that are feeding super worms as a staple, super high phosphorus to calcium ratio already, and then it's just literally a worm full of fat. Yeah. And, they do have protein, but super worms just have a lot of fat because they're a larva.
It's more, the fat ratio is way higher.
Exactly. And so, people are amazed. A lot of people hate crickets, but I have just had so much success feeding crickets and dubias and then throwing earthworms in there. 3 insects may not seem like much variety, but that's where I like to throw in a lot of the supplements. One of my favorites has been Rapashi's Calcium Plus. There's like brewer's yeast in there. There's like microalgae in there. All of these crazy ingredients, whereas like say your standard Zoomed Repta vitamin is just calcium, vitamin B, vitamin D. You don't get the nutrition aspect of all these different ingredients. It's just like, here's your vitamin, here's your minerals. That's it. Which, on one hand, it's nice that that's convenient. But on the other hand, having a powder that literally has 30 ingredients, That's all going into your lizard the moment they eat that one cricket. So while the insect variety may not be broad, again, I mainly just feed 3 feeder items, the supplementation that goes into it is much more complex. And I definitely think if you can tong feed your water dragon, like the Rapashi gel formulas, Grub Pie or Beardy Buffet, those would be really good. I know those are just packed with nutrients. Or like some of the new Arcadia supplements on the market, the Earth Pro, just rotating all these different supplements for the sake of nutritional variety, but then sticking with, your 3 baseline feeders for the sake of lean protein variety, you're going to have a healthy water dragon that's going to live a long life. I remember, and this was one of the big influencers for me, I was browsing an old forum on kingsnake.com. It was like from 2004. And this guy said, yeah, I have this old green water dragon. He just passed away at 18 years of age. Everybody hated me because I kept him lean to where I could just see the hip bones, which, in most lizards, people are like, you see the hip bones, you're starving that animal. But then if you look at the anatomy of these water dragons and other similar agamids like bearded dragons, unlike leopard geckos or even monitors, which store a lot of their fat on their tail, they store the fat on the sides of their body. So if you're feeding a water dragon until you can't see its hip bones, it means that its body has literally become so grotesquely overweight that it's now putting fat reserves in its tail. So typically, I like to keep the water dragon body structure just slightly wider than the tail base. In females, it might be more pear-shaped because as they get older and they've laid eggs, they're sort of going to get that, MILF body, as I like to jokingly say. But then, the males especially, they're just keep them lean. Fat males do not breed well. I can tell you people that have experience with a male that breeds well, like my boy, it's because he's actually able to chase down a female and copulate. Most males can't do that if they're fed mice and goldfish every day. And so, like I said, as far as diet, I may not do the most variety with insects, but I replace my variety with the prey over supplementation.
But either way, they're getting everything that they need. And this is your perspective and what works for you. And trial and error.
Exactly.
You've seen a lot of things. You've read a lot of things. You did your research. And you've adapted your own formula to make what works for you. So that's once again, that's going to go back to the people, trial and error, research,
exactly.
And just trying it, see if it works. Because a lot of those guys, they're all different. They're all going to have this different personality. I've got there's not multi different types of savannas. There's one savanna, and I can tell you that some of my savannas will eat one thing, some of my savannas will eat another thing, and it just really it varies. It varies. So depending on your reptile too is another thing you have to take into consideration. Dakota, nutrition. What do you got?
Well, number one, I think you're like the 4th person to recommend the Rapashi Calcium Plus, so I'm gonna have to start looking into that at this point. Right. I got a bit of a bigger variety right now. I think I'm doing, let's see, so we're doing crickets, red runners, lobsters. I do superworms every now and then. I do the BS black soldier fly larva. I think that's about it. So 5 different prey items, and then whatever I use, I think it's, what's it called, like Repcal or something. I use the Repcal, the calcium D3 without D3, and then some herb fights every now and then.
That's a good supplement. I know Scott Corning with his sailfin lizards, he always recommends Repcal. I mean, their herb fight, I would say, is the best rival next to Rapashi as far as
the herb fight definitely has quite a few different ingredients as far as vitamins and minerals.
So, Alex, so you've got an upcoming clutch, right?
Hopefully. I saw my female literally digging around in the enclosure today. So hopefully by next week or the week after that, she'll lay.
Okay. So are those going to be, do you have any holdbacks? Obviously that's probably going to depend on once they're hatched, but are those going to be available to the public?
Those will. That's the issue. Like I said, as a college student, I don't really have the space for holdbacks. I mean, I already have 3 pet corn snakes, a tegu. It's just not worth it to me to try and expand since I'm already trying to do 2 other major life things at once. So the way I see it, I've got a beautiful pair of water dragons. That's all I need to be happy. And I always sell all of my offspring so far.
Yeah.
Hopefully in the future, I can maybe hold back some just to see and expand. But for now, I'm just sticking with my 2 adults. And when they are ready to go, I'll usually post to my pages that the babies are looking to fly.
I seen your Tegu, and I really appreciate the care that you're giving to him or her, whatever, he or she.
She.
Okay, she looks great. I can definitely tell in the photo she's not overfed. She's definitely well taken care of. So good for you on that.
It's not to change topic. She's tricky because I care for her completely different than most people. I mean, if I posted how I cared for her, like her feeding schedule, I would probably get torn apart by keyboard Karens. But I mean, she's going to be 5.
That's a good one. Keyboard Karen.
I love it.
I mean, she's going to be around 5 years old in March. She was a wild-caught wild-caught Tegu from Florida. I'm getting tired, so my words are switching around. But that, and I've been watching The Mandalorian, so, Yoda speech. But I'm
fans here.
Yeah. But it's like she's a lot of fun. Like I said, the one thing that does suck though is she's living at my buddy's place because since she is a large lizard, she's a little bit too intimidating for my father, so she's not at home. But I still get to see her every other week or so, and I mean she's awesome. I love her so much.
Love Tegus. We all love Tegus here, so that's for sure. But Dakota, anything to add?
No, I don't. I think we went over all the topics that I had going on in my head.
Perfect.
Alex always does a great job of explaining everything, getting everything to fine detail, which I really appreciate. Takes all the woodwork out of me trying to be like, okay, but go a little more in detail. Nah, he's got it all covered.
Yeah, honestly, Alex, I'm so impressed with how to the T you were on everything, being able to thoroughly answer questions, and then before even I asked questions or Dakota asked questions, you already had the answer for it. So we didn't even have to ask. So it was really a pleasure speaking with you tonight. I'm definitely looking forward to speaking with you again and, and hopefully bringing some dragons on so we can kind of see, different colors, behavioral aspects, and really kind of, being able to see them in person to maybe get some people interested in getting some from you. So
I always recommend them. They're awesome.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you for coming on. Everybody, we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Awesome. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for having me.
You too.